Welcome to the Thoughtful Leader podcast. My name is Ben Brearley. I'm a leadership coach and the founder of Thoughtful Leader. The Thoughtful Leader podcast is all about short, sharp leadership advice because thoughtful leadership is good leadership. Welcome to episode 253 of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about why leaders should show vulnerability at work. Now, this is something that is a hot topic lately, and it's a difficult thing for leaders to do. We'll talk about all those things and more in this episode. So let's get into it right now. So leaders often feel pressure to have all the answers and to be stereotypically strong, and showing vulnerability at work is not really an option. But today I'm here to make a case for showing vulnerability at work and why it can have a positive effect. Now, while I feel that attitudes to leadership are shifting, I feel there is still some work to do to enable leaders to be more authentic and to be able to show their vulnerable side from time to time. So in the old days of leadership, the leaders tend to influence outcomes using their formal authority. So there was a lot more of "I'm the boss, so do what I say" going on. Now, while this can be effective if the leader is technically competent, very smart and capable, it does have a bunch of negative side effects at the same time. So firstly, the leader needs to have all the answers to be able to provide the right direction. And if it's wrong, the team will keep going in that direction anyway, or they'll choose to leave because that's the dynamic that has been set. Now, this directive leadership style can also cause resentment amongst team members, especially if they feel the direction is wrong. And it also means there's a lack of input and diversity of opinions, which could actually make for a better decision if they were incorporated. But it's well known these days that inclusive leadership is generally more effective and motivating for teams, but the remnants of the legacy "do what I say" leadership still remains. So why is this if we know better now? We know that people like to be involved and motivated in that way. Well, there's a few reasons that I personally observe. The first one is the high price of failure. And when failure costs many millions or billions of dollars, people tend to get upset, and this pressure can have leaders feel less comfortable delegating and sharing responsibility because they need to have more control over the outcome. Secondly, there's a need for credibility. Leaders sometimes feel compelled to prove their worth, and one way to do this is to make all the decisions and showcase their knowledge, and the source of this challenge may be insecurity or feelings of imposter syndrome that can be hard to shake. There's also generational differences, and the reality is that many people currently sitting in senior executive or board roles are on the older side. Some have grown up in an era where leadership was more likely to be command and control than inclusive, and this entrenched attitude can be hard to shake as well. Then there are gender stereotypes. A female who shows vulnerability might be called too emotional. A male who shows vulnerability may be considered weak. Both may be considered to not be management material, and these stereotypes are not helpful, and they make showing vulnerability at work just that little bit harder. So to make further positive shifts in the workplace, we'll need to show a little vulnerability at work. And there's several potential benefits to this, which I'll cover now. And it would be remiss of me not to mention the work of Brené Brown here. Now, Brené Brown's done extensive research into vulnerability and related topics, and is one of the reasons I am actually speaking about this topic on the podcast. I highly recommend checking out her website and various talks about vulnerability, courage, blame, and empathy. And I'll put a link to those things in the show notes page, which will be thoughtfulleader.com/253 for this episode. So showing vulnerability at work can be daunting, but it is an excellent way to begin building trust. Leaders who show vulnerability at work are exposing themselves to personal risk. For example, let's imagine a leader is confiding in a team member or colleague about various worries relating to a particular project. This information could potentially be used against them by people who have a political or personal point to prove. They could say that the leader is not confident or not cut out to run the project, or make other statements denigrating their capability. However, it's the potential risk that helps to build trust. Leaders are role models for the people they lead. If you expect people to be open and honest with you about their various struggles or worries, what better way than to show them your own human side? And the leader who practices the stiff upper lip approach or never shows emotions is actually communicating something interesting to their team. They're saying that emotions are a sign of weakness. We have it all under control, and this is how we work around here. There's a related article I'd recommend you read as well about how to manage your emotions for better leadership, and I'll put a link to that on the show notes page as well. Now, there's a trust equation that was developed by a company called Trusted Advisor, and I've written and spoken about it before, and the equation is on the show notes page, but basically it goes T for trust equals credibility plus reliability plus intimacy divided by self-orientation. Now, I believe that the factor that vulnerability helps with the most is what they call intimacy, and this is the degree to which someone will be open and honest with you. High intimacy means they'll tell you what they're thinking and what troubles them. They'll confide in you. Low intimacy means they'll keep it to themselves. Now, if you want to be aware of the issues influencing your team so you can better support them, then intimacy is one factor that you need to cultivate in your team. And you can go back and listen to episode 214 about how to start being more trustworthy for your team if you have not already. I'd recommend it. So now, hopefully you've seen some of the potential merits of showing vulnerability at work, but the trick here is, how do you do it? Now, the good news is it's probably something that you naturally want to do, but you may have been holding yourself back. So here's a few ideas for you. Now, number one is to admit to and own your mistakes or failures. Now, if you never make mistakes, that must be a nice thing, but for the rest of us, they happen. Owning up to them is a display of vulnerability. A colleague once told me about a candidate they interviewed for a project management role, and in the interview, they asked the candidate to tell them about a previous project failure that they had experienced. Now, this candidate said that they'd never had a failed project. So I used to do a lot of project management work, and I consider myself to be a pretty good project manager, but I can tell you a bunch of stories about project issues and failures that I was part of. And if you also do a quick Google search for project failure rates, you'll see statistics ranging from 50 to 80%. Now, were all the project failures in my projects my fault? Well, no, but I may have been a contributing factor. And there were successful projects, and I've led a few of them too. But the point is, if you pretend you have never failed or made a mistake, you'll probably lose credibility because everyone makes mistakes. The second thing you can do to show vulnerability is to share humorous stories. Now, on a similar vein to the previous point, this one is about sharing stories or anecdotes that may show you in a less than perfect light. For example, you may share a story about how you mispronounced the CEO's name during a presentation, or you didn't recognize them when they were in the lift with you. Now, these sorts of stories can do a few powerful things. The first thing they do is they show other people that you don't take yourself too seriously. The second thing these stories do is they demonstrate confidence. If you were insecure or fearful, you would never share these stories. They can also open the door for other people to share their own interesting experiences. So once again, it's about showing that human side and not being afraid to do so. When I'm delivering training, I'll often share stories about how I stuffed up earlier in my career, and of course where it's relevant to the training. But that sort of thing can build rapport with the audience, as long as you don't do it too much, and we'll talk a bit about that later. There's a related article on this topic as well. Are you taking yourself too seriously? So check that one out through the show notes page, selfleader.com/253. The third thing you can do is ask for input. So asking your team members, colleagues, or your manager for input can feel daunting, and it's another example of showing vulnerability at work. Asking for input not only gives people a chance to contribute, which is a great thing for motivation and sense of purpose, but it also shows that you don't believe your ideas are all that there is, because diverse opinions make for better solutions. Your ideas might not always be the best. I believe it's a show of vulnerability to ask for input because we are intentionally pushing against the entrenched belief that leaders know best or they know everything. Another thing you can do to show vulnerability is to admit you don't know something. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we've been conditioned to believe that we should have all the answers. But we know this is impossible logically. Sometimes it can be worthwhile simply saying that you don't know the answer. Other people will likely find out eventually if you don't know, and you'll look worse when they do. And you'll no doubt feel pressure to pretend you know the answer, and some people will look at you and say that you should know. Now, if that happens, you can tell them that you'll go and find out. And it does take courage to do this because vulnerability takes courage. Now, you might be thinking, well, if I did all of these things, I'd seem like a really useless leader. And I agree to some degree. If you did all of these things all the time, you may be perceived as ineffective. So, for example, if you're constantly telling people about your mistakes and your mistakes happen all the time, then you won't look very credible. But as with many things in leadership, it's all about balance. If you show vulnerability all day, every day, this may impact your credibility. But neglect to show any vulnerability and you may be missing an opportunity to strengthen the relationships within your team. So I'm interested in your feedback on this one. What do you think about showing vulnerability at work? Let me and all the other Thoughtful Leaders know in the comments on the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/253. And while you're at it, if you like this podcast, please leave a positive review on your podcast app of choice. I really appreciate it. It only takes a minute and it helps me get the word out about the podcast. So show a little bit of vulnerability at work. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll be back next time.